Everyone says family is forever. But what happens when your own daughter looks you in the eye and calls you a burden? This is my story, and it's not what you think. My name is Margaret Thompson, and at 68 years old, I thought I'd seen every kind of betrayal. The kind that comes from strangers, from business partners, even from friends who disappear when times get tough. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what my own daughter said at dinner that night. For 40 years, I gave her everything, my money, my time, my life. And this is how she repaid me. But what happened next, what I did in the following months, it changed everything. And she never saw it coming. Let me take you back to where it all began, 40 years ago, when Jessica was just 2 years old and the world felt like it was crashing down around me. It was a Tuesday morning in 1985 when the phone call came. Robert, my husband of 5 years, had been in a car accident on his way to work. The doctors said he didn't suffer, that it was instant. But I suffered. Oh, how I suffered. There I was, 28 years old, with a toddler who kept asking, "Where's Daddy?" and medical bills that seemed to multiply by the hour. Robert's life insurance barely covered the funeral costs. The modest savings we'd built together evaporated faster than morning dew. I remember standing in our little kitchen, Jessica tugging at my worn-out jeans and making a promise that would define the next 4 decades of my life. "Mommy's going to take care of you, baby girl," I whispered, kissing her blonde curls. "No matter what it takes." And I meant it. Every single word. Within a month, I was working 2 jobs. During the day, I cleaned offices downtown, scrubbing floors and emptying trash cans, while Jessica stayed with Mrs. Patterson next door. At night, after putting Jessica to bed, I worked as a seamstress, taking in alterations and mending clothes until my eyes burned and my fingers cramped. The money was tight, tighter than bark on a tree, as my mother used to say. There were weeks when I'd eat nothing but crackers and peanut butter so Jessica could have proper meals. I told her it was a special diet, that Mommy was trying to lose weight. She believed me the way children do when they trust their parents completely. When Jessica turned 6 and started asking about birthday parties and toys she saw other kids with, I picked up a 3rd job, weekend catering gigs that paid cash under the table. I'd work Friday nights and Saturdays, coming home exhausted but with enough extra money to buy Jessica the bike she'd been eyeing at the department store. I'll never forget her face when she saw that pink bicycle with the white basket on Christmas morning. She squealed so loud that Mrs. Patterson knocked on our door, thinking something was wrong. "Mommy, how did Santa know exactly what I wanted?" Jessica asked, her eyes wide with wonder. "Santa has his ways, sweetheart," I said, not mentioning the overtime shifts and skipped meals that had made that bike possible. As Jessica grew older, the sacrifices grew bigger. When she was in 8th grade and wanted to join the soccer team, I sold my grandmother's jewelry, the only valuable thing I owned, to pay for equipment and travel expenses. When she needed a dress for her first school dance, I worked extra hours for 3 weeks straight to afford it. But the biggest sacrifice came when Jessica was 18 and got accepted to State University. "Mom, I got in!" she screamed, bursting through our front door with the acceptance letter clutched in her hand. "I got into State! Can you believe it?" I could believe it. Jessica had always been smart, always worked hard in school. But as I looked at that letter, all I could think about was the tuition cost, $32,000 a year. We might as well have been talking about $32 million. That night, after Jessica had called all her friends and fallen asleep clutching her acceptance letter, I sat at our small kitchen table with a calculator and a pile of bills. No matter how I worked the numbers, they didn't add up. My combined income from all 3 jobs barely covered our basic living expenses. But I'd made a promise all those years ago. "Mommy's going to take care of you." The next morning, I called a realtor. Our little house, the only home Jessica had ever known, wasn't worth much, but it was something. Within 6 weeks, I'd sold it and we'd moved into a tiny 2-bedroom apartment across town. The entire proceeds went toward Jessica's first year of college. "Are you sure about this, Mom?" Jessica asked as we packed up her childhood bedroom. Maybe I could take out loans or go to community college first. Nonsense, I said, taping up another box. Education is the one thing no one can ever take away from you. Your father would have wanted this. And he would have. Robert had always talked about giving Jessica every opportunity we never had. For the next 4 years, I worked myself to the bone to keep Jessica in school. I took on extra cleaning contracts, worked holidays and weekends, and lived on ramen noodles and coffee. When Jessica called home upset about something, a difficult professor, a failed test, friend drama, I listened for hours, offering encouragement and support even when I was dead tired. During her sophomore year, Jessica got sick with pneumonia and had to be hospitalized. The insurance, we had barely covered anything, and the bills started piling up again. I took out a personal loan against my future earnings and drove 4 hours each way every weekend to take care of her. "I'm so scared, Mom," she whispered from her hospital bed, looking younger than her 19 years. "Don't you worry about anything, sweetheart," I said, stroking her hair. "Mommy's here. I'll always be here." When she graduated summa cum laude with her business degree, I was the proudest mother in that auditorium. I'd saved up for months to buy a new dress for the occasion, the first new piece of clothing I'd bought for myself in years. "I did it, Mom," Jessica said, hugging me tight after the ceremony. "We did it." "You did it, baby girl," I corrected her. "This is all you." But it wasn't all her. It was nights I went without dinner so she could have textbooks. It was working through the flu because I couldn't afford to miss a day's pay. It was choosing between heating our apartment and buying her a winter coat. The coat always won. After college, I helped Jessica get set up in her first apartment. When she got her first real job at a marketing firm, I co-signed her car loan because her credit wasn't established yet. When she met David 3 years later, I welcomed him into our family with open arms. "Your daughter is amazing," David told me at their engagement party. "You did such a good job raising her." "She raised herself, mostly," I said. But inside, I glowed with pride. When they decided to buy their first house, they came to me with the problem. "We have enough for the down payment," Jessica explained, "but the bank wants to see more assets for approval. Could you maybe co-sign the mortgage?" I finished. "Of course, sweetheart." I didn't hesitate. By then, I'd built up decent credit from years of carefully managing our limited finances. My signature on that document meant Jessica and David could start their life together in a real home. Over the years, there were other requests. Help with the wedding costs when their original budget fell short. A loan when David was between jobs for 3 months. Money for Jessica's MBA program that would advance her career. Each time, I said yes. Each time, I found a way to make it work. "We'll pay you back, Mom," Jessica always promised, "as soon as we get ahead." "My family doesn't keep tabs," I'd always respond. "We help each other." And I believed that, right up until the night when everything changed. By the time I was 65, my body was starting to give out. Decades of physical labor had taken their toll on my knees and back. The doctor said I needed to reduce my workload, maybe think about retirement. But retirement was a luxury I couldn't afford. I had no savings. Everything had gone to Jessica over the years. That's when Jessica made the offer that seemed like a blessing at the time. "Mom, why don't you come live with us?" she suggested during one of our weekly phone calls. "The house is big enough, and you could help with the housework. It would save you money on rent, and David and I could take care of you for a change." It sounded perfect. After 40 years of struggle, I could finally rest a little, be part of a real family again, help take care of the home that I'd helped them buy. "Are you sure?" I asked. "I don't want to be in the way." "Don't be silly," Jessica laughed. "You're my mother. This is your home, too." So I gave up my little apartment and moved in with Jessica and David. For the first few months, it felt wonderful. I cooked meals, kept the house tidy, and enjoyed having people around again. After years of living alone, the sound of voices and laughter filled an emptiness I hadn't even realized was there. But slowly, things began to change. It started with small comments. "Mom, maybe don't use so much detergent. It's expensive. Could you keep the TV volume down when David's working from home?" Do you really need to take such long showers? Then came the bigger issues. Jessica began treating me less like a family member and more like hired help. The requests for housework became demands. The grocery budget became something I needed to stick to, but was never consulted about creating. "Margaret, we need to talk about boundaries," David said one evening, using my first name instead of calling me Mom like he had for years. "This is our house, and we need to make sure everyone understands the rules." Rules. In a house that my signature on the mortgage had helped them buy. But I bit my tongue. I told myself they were just adjusting to having another person in their space, that it would get better with time. It didn't get better. It got worse. The evening that changed everything started like any other. I'd spent the day cleaning, doing laundry, and preparing dinner. Pot roast with vegetables, Jessica's favorite since she was little. I'd used my own grocery money to buy the good cut of meat, wanting to do something special. As we sat down to eat, the atmosphere felt tense. Jessica and David exchanged glances across the table, the kind of looks that pass between married couples when they've been discussing something serious. "This looks great, Margaret," David said, but his tone was flat, distracted. "Thank you, dear," I replied, serving everyone generous portions. "I hope you're hungry." We ate in silence for a few minutes. I kept trying to start conversations, asking about Jessica's work, mentioning something funny I'd seen on the news, but their responses were short, almost cold. Finally, Jessica set down her fork and looked directly at me. "Mom, we need to have a serious conversation." My heart started beating faster. The tone in her voice reminded me of the way she used to sound as a teenager when she was about to ask for something big or deliver bad news. "Of course, sweetheart. What's on your mind?" Jessica glanced at David, who gave her an encouraging nod. "It's not working out," she said bluntly. "Having you live here, it's too much." I felt like I'd been slapped. "What do you mean, too much?" "You're always here," David interjected, "always underfoot. We can't have privacy in our own home." "But I stay in my room most evenings," I protested. "I try to give you space." "It's not just about space," Jessica said, her voice growing harder. "It's about everything. The extra grocery bills, the utilities, the wear and tear on the house. We can't afford to support another person." I stared at my daughter, this woman I'd raised, educated, and helped establish in life, and felt something cold settle in my chest. "Support me?" I said quietly. "Jessica, I buy my own groceries. I pay for my own phone. I even bought new sheets for the bed because I didn't want to use yours." "That's not the point," David said, his voice rising slightly. "The point is that this arrangement isn't working for us anymore." "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. Jessica and David exchanged another look. "There are options," Jessica said. "Senior living communities, assisted living facilities, places where you'd be with people your own age." "You want to put me in a nursing home?" The words came out as barely a whisper. "Not a nursing home," David said quickly, "just somewhere more appropriate." Appropriate, as if my presence in their lives had become inappropriate. I looked around the dining room, at the furniture I'd helped them move in, at the walls I'd helped them paint when they first bought the house, at the family photos that included me smiling and happy. "I don't understand," I said, my voice trembling. "I thought this was working out. I thought you wanted me here." "We did," Jessica said, and for a moment she sounded like my little girl again. "We thought we did, but it's just too hard. Having someone else here all the time depending on us, depending on them, after 40 years of them depending on me." "I'm not depending on you," I said, finding strength in my voice. "I take care of myself. I help around the house. I thought I was contributing." "You are," Jessica said quickly. It's complicated." "What's complicated about it?" The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Finally, David spoke up. "Look, Margaret, we're young. We want to be able to come and go as we please, have friends over, live our lives without worrying about making noise or having someone always around. You want to live your lives, I repeated slowly, and I'm preventing that. You're not understanding, Jessica said, frustration creeping into her voice. We're trying to be nice about this. Nice about kicking me out? We're not kicking you out, David said. We're having an adult conversation about living arrangements that aren't working. I set down my fork, my appetite completely gone. The pot roast that had smelled so good an hour ago now seemed to turn to ash in my mouth. When? I asked quietly. When what? Jessica replied. When do you want me to leave? Another exchanged glance. Another moment of silence that felt like a lifetime. Soon, David said. Maybe by the end of the month? 3 weeks. They were giving me 3 weeks to figure out where to go and how to afford it. I nodded slowly, not trusting my voice to stay steady. Can I finish my dinner first? I asked. Of course, Jessica said, sounding relieved that I wasn't arguing or crying. And Mom, this doesn't change anything between us. You're still my mother. We still love you. Still love me, but not enough to let me stay in the home I'd helped them buy. I ate the rest of my meal in silence, each bite harder to swallow than the last. When I was finished, I quietly cleared my plate and went to my room. That night, lying in the bed I'd bought with my own money, in the room I'd painted myself when I moved in, I stared at the ceiling and tried to understand how I'd gotten here. 40 years of sacrifice. 40 years of putting Jessica's needs before my own. 40 years of family doesn't keep tabs, and we help each other. And this was where it led. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of apartment hunting and painful silence. Jessica and David were polite but distant, as if I'd already left. I found a small one-bedroom apartment across town. Nothing fancy, but clean and affordable on my limited social security. The night before I was supposed to leave, I packed my belongings into the same suitcases I'd used when I moved in 6 months earlier. It didn't take long. 40 years of life condensed into 2 pieces of luggage and a few boxes. As I closed the last suitcase, I allowed myself to hope that maybe Jessica would change her mind. Maybe she'd knock on my door and say she'd made a mistake, that she wanted me to stay after all. But that knock never came. The morning I left, Jessica was already at work. David helped me carry my bags to the car with the mechanical politeness of someone fulfilling an obligation. "Take care of yourself, Margaret," he said as I loaded the last box. "I always have," I replied. And that was it. 6 months of thinking I finally had a real home again, and it was over. I drove to my new apartment with tears in my eyes and a pain in my chest that felt like it might never heal. But I told myself it would be okay, that Jessica just needed some space, and we'd work things out. I was wrong about that too. The first month in my new apartment was the loneliest I'd ever experienced. I'd call Jessica every few days trying to maintain some connection, but our conversations grew shorter and more strained each time. "How are you settling in?" she'd ask, but I could hear the distraction in her voice. "Fine," I'd say, not mentioning the sleepless nights or the way I'd started talking to myself just to hear a human voice in the empty apartment. "That's good. Listen, Mom, I have to run. David and I have dinner plans." Dinner plans. Life moving on without me. By the second month, Jessica stopped answering my calls regularly. When she did pick up, she sounded impatient, like I was interrupting something important. "Is everything okay?" I asked during one particularly brief conversation. "Everything's fine, Mom. I'm just busy with work and life stuff. Life stuff that didn't include me." The third month brought my birthday. 78 years old, and for the first time in decades, I spent it alone. I kept checking my phone, thinking surely Jessica would call or at least send a text. Nothing. I waited until evening, then finally called her myself. "Oh, Mom," she said when she heard my voice. "What's up?" "It's my birthday," I said softly. A pause. "Oh, right. Happy birthday." No explanation for forgetting. No apology, just, "Oh, right. Are you free for dinner this weekend?" I asked, hating how desperate I sounded. I could cook or we could go out somewhere. "This weekend is really packed," Jessica said. "Maybe sometime next month?" "Maybe sometime next month. For my birthday dinner." That night, I sat in my small apartment and cried harder than I had since Robert died, not just for the forgotten birthday, but for the slow, painful realization that I'd somehow become disposable to the person I'd devoted my entire life to raising. But even then, even sitting there alone on my birthday, I told myself it was temporary, that Jessica was just going through a phase, adjusting to her new freedom, that eventually she'd remember all the years of love and sacrifice and come back to me. I kept telling myself that right up until the day I tried to call and discovered she'd blocked my number. It happened on a Tuesday morning, 3 months after I'd moved out. I'd tried calling Jessica's cell phone to check on her. She'd mentioned the week before that she was fighting a cold. The phone rang once, then went straight to a generic voicemail message. I tried again, thinking it might be a network issue. Same thing. Then I tried calling the house phone. Disconnected. Panic set in. What if something had happened to them? What if there was an emergency? I drove across town to their house, my heart pounding with worry and fear. When I pulled up to the curb, everything looked normal. Both cars were in the driveway. The house looked exactly the same as it had when I'd lived there. I walked up to the front door and rang the bell. David answered, and the look on his face told me everything I needed to know. Not surprise at seeing me, not concern about why I was there, just annoyance. "Margaret," he said, not moving from the doorway. "What are you doing here?" "I tried calling," I said. The phone went straight to voicemail, and I was worried. "We're fine," he said curtly. "Is Jessica home? I'd like to talk to her." David glanced back into the house, then stepped outside and partially closed the door behind him. "Look, Margaret," he said, lowering his voice, "Jessica doesn't want to see you right now." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What do you mean she doesn't want to see me?" "She needs space. This whole situation has been really stressful for her, and she just needs time to work through it." "What situation?" I asked, genuinely confused. "David, I don't understand what I did wrong." He sighed heavily like he was dealing with a particularly difficult child. "It's not about doing something wrong. It's about boundaries, about letting us live our lives without interference." Interference. My love for my daughter had become interference. "How long?" I whispered. "How long does she need space?" "I don't know," David said. "Maybe it's better if you don't contact us for a while. Let things settle down." "A while?" "David, she's my daughter, my only family. And you're suffocating her," he said bluntly. "She feels guilty every time she talks to you because you sound so lonely and sad. It's not fair to put that on her." I stared at him, this man I'd welcomed into our family, who'd called me mom for years, who was now telling me that loving my daughter too much was my crime. "I never meant to make her feel guilty," I said quietly. "Maybe not," David said, "but that's what's happening, so please just give us some space." He went back inside and closed the door, leaving me standing on the porch of the house I'd helped them buy, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. I drove home in a daze, back to my small apartment where the silence felt heavier than ever. That night, I looked through old photo albums trying to understand where everything had gone wrong. Pictures of Jessica as a baby, as a little girl, graduating from high school and college, pictures of me at her wedding, smiling and proud, pictures of the three of us together looking like a happy family. When had it all changed? When had my love become suffocating? When had my presence become interference? I couldn't find the answers in those photos. All I could see was a woman who'd given everything to her child and somehow, in the process, had lost her entirely. The months that followed were the hardest of my life. I tried to build a routine, to find purpose in my days, but everything felt hollow without Jessica in it. I'd see mothers and daughters together at the grocery store or in restaurants, and the pain would hit me all over again. I started volunteering at a local literacy center, teaching adults to read. It gave me something to do, somewhere to go, people who appreciated my help. But at the end of each day, I'd go home to my empty apartment, and the silence would remind me of everything I'd lost. Sometimes I'd drive by Jessica's house just to see the lights on and know she was okay. I never stopped or knocked. I'd promised David I'd give them space, and I kept that promise even though it was killing me. 6 months after that conversation on their porch, I saw Jessica at the grocery store. She was in the produce section, picking out apples, looking healthy and happy. My heart leapt with joy and hope. Maybe enough time had passed. Maybe she was ready to talk. I approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. "Jessica?" I said softly. She turned, and for just a moment I saw my little girl in her eyes, but then her expression closed off, became guarded. "Hi, Mom," she said, her voice careful and distant. "How are you, sweetheart? You look good." "I'm fine," she said, then glanced around like she was looking for an escape route. "I miss you," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "I miss talking to you, hearing about your life." Jessica shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, please don't do this here." "Do what?" "Talk to my daughter?" "Make this emotional," she said quietly. "I told you I needed space." "It's been 6 months," I said. "How much space do you need?" She didn't answer right away. When she did, her words shattered what was left of my heart. "I don't know," she said. "Maybe we both just need to accept that this is how things are now. This is how things are now. My daughter, my only child, the person I devoted my entire life to raising, was telling me that our relationship was over." "Jessica," I whispered, tears starting to fall. "Please, I love you. I've always loved you. Everything I did was for you." "I know," she said, and for a moment her voice softened. "I know you love me, Mom, but love can be overwhelming sometimes. It can be too much." Too much. My love was too much. "I don't understand," I said. "How can love be too much?" "When it comes with expectations," she said quietly. "When it comes with guilt and obligation and the weight of everything you've sacrificed, it's hard to breathe under all of that." I stared at her, trying to comprehend what she was saying. "I never asked you for anything in return." "You didn't have to ask," Jessica said. "It was always there, unspoken, the reminder of everything you'd given up, everything you'd done. How could I ever be enough to deserve all that?" "You were always enough," I said desperately. "You were everything to me." "That's the problem," she said sadly. "I was everything to you, and that's too much responsibility for anyone to carry." She turned to walk away, then stopped and looked back at me one more time. "I'm sorry, Mom," she said. "I really am. But I can't be your whole world anymore. I can't carry the weight of your happiness. I need to live my own life." And then she was gone, disappearing around the corner of the aisle, leaving me standing there among the apples and oranges with tears streaming down my face and my heart breaking into pieces I wasn't sure could ever be put back together. That night, alone in my apartment, I finally understood the truth I'd been avoiding for months. My daughter was gone. Not dead, but gone from my life just the same. The relationship I'd thought was unbreakable had been severed, and I was left with nothing but memories and the crushing realization that somehow, in loving her too much, I'd lost her completely. I sat in my small living room, surrounded by the remnants of a life that had been entirely devoted to someone who no longer wanted me in theirs, and wondered what I was supposed to do with whatever years I had left. The silence was deafening. The loneliness was suffocating. And for the first time in my life, I had no idea who I was supposed to be if I wasn't Jessica's mother. For 3 months after that encounter at the grocery store, I lived like a ghost. I went through the motions of daily life, waking up, eating meals I couldn't taste, volunteering at the literacy center, coming home to silence. But inside, I felt hollow, like all the vital parts of me had been carved out and taken away. I kept replaying Jessica's words in my mind. I can't be your whole world anymore. I can't carry the weight of your happiness. Had I really done that to her? Had my love become a burden so heavy that she had to cut me out of her life to breathe? The questions haunted me, but I had no answers. No one to talk to about it. The volunteers at the literacy center were kind, but they were acquaintances, not friends. I hadn't cultivated close relationships outside of Jessica. She had been my world, just like she said. It was on a rainy Thursday in October when everything changed. I'd been looking for my reading glasses to help one of my students with a particularly difficult passage when I remembered I might have left them in the bedroom. As I searched through the small dresser drawer, my fingers brushed against something I'd forgotten was there. A manila envelope yellowed with age, tucked behind some old scarves. I pulled it out, curious, and saw my own handwriting on the front. Important papers, keep safe. Inside were documents I hadn't looked at in years. My original Social Security card, Robert's death certificate, and underneath those, a stack of bank statements and financial papers from when Jessica was in college. I almost put them back. What was the point of looking at ancient history? But something made me sit down on the bed and flip through them anyway. Maybe it was the need to remember a time when Jessica and I were close, when she needed me and was grateful for my help. The first few papers were routine. Old savings account statements, records of the loans I'd taken out for Jessica's education. But then I found something that made me stop cold. A joint savings account statement from First National Bank, dated 35 years ago. An account I'd opened when Jessica turned 18, adding her name so she could access money for college expenses. But what caught my attention wasn't the account itself. It was the balance and the transaction history. According to the statement, there had been $47,000 in that account when Jessica graduated college, money from the sale of our house plus interest that I'd managed to save despite all the expenses, money I'd forgotten about in all the chaos of helping Jessica get started in life. My hands shaking, I dug deeper into the pile. More statements, more records. A car loan application where I was listed as the primary borrower, with Jessica as a co-signer. Not the other way around like I'd remembered. An insurance policy where Jessica was the sole beneficiary of not just my life insurance, but a secondary policy on the house that I'd apparently continued paying for years after she moved out. And then I found the mortgage papers for Jessica and David's house. I had to read them 3 times before the words sank in. According to the loan documents, I wasn't just a co-signer. I was listed as the primary borrower, with Jessica and David as secondary borrowers. My name was first on everything. The loan application, the deed, the insurance policies. How had I forgotten something so important? But as I kept reading, the memories started coming back. Jessica and David hadn't qualified for the loan on their own. Their combined income was too low, their credit history too short. The mortgage broker had suggested making me the primary borrower since I had decades of solid credit history and a steady employment record. "It's just paperwork, Mom," Jessica had said at the time. "You'll be on the deed too, so you'll have legal protection. And we'll handle all the payments, obviously." Obviously. Except now I was looking at documents that told a different story. I found copies of bank statements from the joint checking account we'd set up for the mortgage payments. For the first 2 years, the money had come from Jessica and David's accounts as promised. But then, there were months where the funds came from my account. Months that gradually became the norm rather than the exception. By the 3rd year, I was making the full mortgage payment myself, along with the property taxes and homeowner's insurance. $2,400 a month, coming directly out of my Social Security and the small pension I'd earned from my years of working. No wonder I'd had to move in with them when my health started failing. I'd been supporting 2 households, my rental apartment and their mortgage, on a fixed income. But that wasn't the worst of it. The worst was a series of cash withdrawal slips, clipped together with a note in Jessica's handwriting. Emergency fund will pay back ASAP. The withdrawals were from our joint savings account totaling nearly $30,000 over a 5-year period. Money taken while I was living with them. Money I'd apparently given Jessica permission to use for various emergencies. Her MBA program, David's period of unemployment, the roof repair on the house, the down payment for David's new car when his old one broke down. Emergency after emergency, all solved with my money. Money I'd said family doesn't keep tabs on. Money I'd forgotten about because I trusted Jessica to keep track of our shared financial obligations. I set the papers down with trembling hands and walked to my small kitchen. I needed coffee or tea or something to steady myself while I processed what I'd just discovered. But as I stood there waiting for the water to boil, the full scope of the situation began to sink in. I hadn't just given Jessica my love and support over the years. I'd given her my financial security, my home ownership, my independence. And when I'd needed help, when I was too old and tired to maintain my own household, she'd made me feel like a burden for asking for the same support I'd given her for decades. The woman who'd called me suffocating was living in a house I was paying for. The daughter who'd said my love came with too many expectations had built her entire adult life on my financial foundation. And when I'd needed a place to live, she'd kicked me out. I sat at my small kitchen table, surrounded by decades of proof that I'd been more than a loving mother. I'd been Jessica's financial lifeline. And somehow, in the process of helping her build her life, I'd forgotten my own worth. For the first time in months, I felt something other than sadness and confusion. I felt angry, not the hot, explosive kind of anger that makes you want to scream and throw things. This was something colder, more calculated. The kind of anger that comes from finally seeing clearly after years of fog. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with a calculator and those old financial documents, adding up exactly how much I'd given Jessica over the years. The college tuition, the car loans, the house down payment, the mortgage payments, the emergency fund withdrawals, all of it. The number I came up with was staggering. Over $340,000 in direct financial support, not counting the years of free childcare, housework, and emotional labor. $340,000 that Jessica had never acknowledged, never thanked me for, never offered to pay back. $340,000 that apparently came with the expectation that I would continue to be grateful for whatever scraps of attention she chose to give me. As the sun came up, I made a decision. I was done being grateful. I was done accepting crumbs. And I was done pretending that what Jessica had done to me was acceptable just because she was my daughter. It was time to take back some control. The next morning, I called First National Bank and made an appointment to speak with a financial advisor. When I arrived at the bank, I brought every document I'd found, along with a notebook where I'd written down my questions. Mrs. Thompson, the advisor, a young woman named Sarah, said as she reviewed my paperwork, "I have to say this is a fairly complex financial situation. Can you help me understand what you're hoping to accomplish today?" "I want to understand exactly what legal rights I have regarding the assets that are in my name," I said calmly, "and I want to know what options I have for restructuring my financial obligations." Sarah spent nearly 2 hours going through everything with me. She explained that as the primary borrower on the mortgage, I had significant legal rights regarding the property. She showed me how the joint accounts worked, how I could remove or add signers, how I could change beneficiaries on various policies. "Mrs. Thompson," she said finally, "I'm not a lawyer, so I can't give you legal advice, but I can tell you that you have more options than you might realize. If you're considering making changes to these financial arrangements, you might want to consult with an attorney who specializes in family law and estate planning." "I think I will," I said. "Can you recommend someone?" That afternoon, I had an appointment with Patricia Williams, an attorney who specialized in elder law and family financial disputes. Her office was small but professional, filled with books and certificates that spoke to her expertise. "Mrs. Thompson," she said after reviewing the documents I'd brought, "this is actually more common than you might think. Adult children who become financially dependent on their parents and then begin to treat the relationship as an entitlement rather than a gift." "Is there anything I can do about it?" I asked. "Legally?" "Yes, quite a bit," Patricia said. "You're the primary borrower on their mortgage, which means you have significant leverage. You're also the primary account holder on several financial instruments that benefit them. The question is, what do you want to accomplish?" I thought about that for a moment. What did I want? I want my daughter to understand that what I gave her was a gift, not an obligation, I said slowly. I want her to realize that treating me like a burden while living off my financial support is unacceptable. Patricia nodded. "There are several approaches we could take. We could start with a formal accounting, a letter detailing exactly what you've provided financially and requesting repayment. We could restructure the mortgage to remove their names and put the house entirely in your name, since you're already making the payments. We could close the joint accounts and revoke their access to your assets. And if I did those things, they'd be forced to qualify for their own mortgage if they want to keep the house. They'd need to take financial responsibility for their own lives, and you'd regain control over your own assets." It sounded so simple when she put it like that. Take back what was mine. Stop subsidizing a lifestyle for people who'd made it clear they didn't want me in their lives. "What would you recommend?" I asked. "Honestly, I'd recommend starting with a conversation. Give them a chance to acknowledge what you've provided and work out a fair arrangement. If that doesn't work..." Patricia shrugged. "Then you use the legal tools at your disposal." "And if I gave them, say, 30 days to respond?" "That's more than generous," Patricia said. "Most people in your situation wouldn't give them 30 minutes." I left Patricia's office with a draft letter and a clear plan. The letter outlined in precise detail every financial contribution I'd made to Jessica and David's life over the years. It requested a meeting to discuss repayment arrangements and future financial boundaries. It was firm but not hostile, clear but not threatening. I spent 3 days revising it, making sure every word was exactly right. Then I mailed it to their house, the house I'd been paying for, via certified mail. The receipt showing it had been delivered came back 5 days later. Then I waited. 1 week passed, then 2. No response. On the 3rd week, my phone rang. Jessica's number, the one that had been blocked for months, showed up on my caller ID. I let it ring 4 times before answering. "Hello, Jessica." "Mom." Her voice was tight, strained. "We need to talk." "Yes," I said calmly. "We do." "Did you receive my letter?" "We received it." A pause. "Can you come over tonight? David and I would like to discuss this with you." "Of course," I said. "What time works for you?" 7 o'clock? I'll be there." I hung up and sat quietly for a moment. After months of silence, Jessica was finally ready to talk. The letter had accomplished what months of tears and pleading couldn't. It had gotten her attention. But as I prepared for the evening ahead, I realized something had changed in me. I wasn't nervous about seeing Jessica. I wasn't hoping for reconciliation or afraid of confrontation. I was simply curious to see what she would say now that she knew I understood the true nature of our relationship. At exactly 7 o'clock, I knocked on the door of the house I'd been making payments on for the past 8 years. David answered, and his expression was carefully neutral. "Margaret," he said, "come in." Jessica was waiting in the living room, sitting on the couch I'd helped them pick out when they first moved in. She looked tired, older somehow, and she didn't get up to greet me. "Hi, Mom," she said quietly. "Hello, sweetheart," I replied, settling into the armchair across from her. "Thank you for inviting me over." An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Finally, David cleared his throat. "Margaret, about that letter." "What about it?" I asked pleasantly. Some of those numbers seem inflated, he said carefully. I opened my purse and pulled out a folder containing copies of all the bank statements, loan documents, and receipts I'd found. Which numbers specifically? I asked, setting the folder on the coffee table. Jessica and David exchanged a glance. Mom, Jessica said, you're making it sound like we took advantage of you. That's not what happened. What did happen then? I asked. We had an arrangement, David said. A family arrangement. You helped us when we needed it, and we took care of you when you needed help. You took care of me? I repeated. David, according to my records, I was paying your mortgage even while I was living here. How exactly were you taking care of me? Another silence. Jessica shifted uncomfortably. You never said anything about the money, she said finally. You always said family doesn't keep tabs. You're right, I agreed. I did say that, but Jessica, saying family doesn't keep tabs doesn't mean family doesn't have responsibilities to each other. What do you mean? She asked. I mean that when someone has been supporting you financially for decades, maybe you don't get to call them a burden when they need emotional support. Jessica's face flushed red. It wasn't about the money. Wasn't it? I asked quietly. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you were very comfortable accepting my financial support while rejecting any emotional responsibility toward me. We never asked you to pay our mortgage, David said defensively. I opened the folder and pulled out the original loan documents. Actually, you did. It's right here in writing. I'm the primary borrower because you couldn't qualify on your own. That was just paperwork, Jessica protested. No, sweetheart, I said gently. That was a legal and financial commitment that I've been honoring for 8 years. A commitment that you apparently decided I should continue honoring even after you threw me out of this house. We didn't throw you out, David said. We had a conversation about living arrangements. You gave me 3 weeks' notice to find a new place to live, I replied. In most states, that's called eviction. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. Mom, why are you being like this? This isn't like you. Isn't it? I asked. Jessica, how would you know what I'm like? You blocked my phone number. You've refused to see me for months. You've treated me like I don't exist. I needed space, she said, her voice breaking. And you got it, I said, at my expense. Literally. I pulled out another document, the bank statement showing the most recent mortgage payment. This payment was withdrawn from my account 6 days ago. So while you've been enjoying your space from your suffocating mother, I've been paying for the roof over your head. David looked genuinely shocked. I thought the auto pay was coming from our account. It was, for a while, I said, but you changed it to my account 3 years ago when David lost his job, and apparently never changed it back. We can fix that, Jessica said quickly. We can take over the payments starting next month. Can you? I asked. Because according to my conversation with the bank, you'd need to qualify for a new mortgage in your own names, and given your current income and the amount still owed, that might be challenging. I could see the reality of the situation sinking in on their faces. Without my financial backing, they couldn't afford the house they'd been living in for 8 years. What are you saying, Mom? Jessica asked quietly. I'm saying that actions have consequences, I replied. For 40 years, I put your needs before my own. I sacrificed my financial security, my independence, my own happiness to make sure you had everything you needed. And when I needed something from you, just basic love and respect, you decided I was too much trouble. That's not fair, David said. You're making it sound like we're monsters. No, I said calmly. I'm making it sound like you're adults who need to take responsibility for your choices. Jessica was crying now, but I felt strangely detached from her tears. For so many years, seeing Jessica upset would have made me drop everything to comfort her. Now, I just waited for her to speak. What do you want from us? She finally asked. I want you to understand that what I gave you was a gift, not an entitlement, I said. I want you to acknowledge that treating someone who's been supporting you financially like a burden is unacceptable, and I want you to take financial responsibility for your own lives." "And if we do that?" David asked. "If we acknowledge everything you've done, will you keep helping with the house?" I looked around the living room, at the furniture I'd helped them buy, the walls I'd helped them paint, the home I'd helped them create and had been paying for ever since. "David," I said quietly, "I think my days of helping are over." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Jessica's crying intensified, but I stood up calmly. "I'll give you 60 days to figure out your financial situation," I said. "After that, I'll be making some changes to my banking and legal arrangements." "Mom," Jessica sobbed, "please don't do this. I love you. I've always loved you." I looked at my daughter, this woman I'd raised, sacrificed for, and loved unconditionally for 43 years, and felt something I'd never felt before: peace. "I love you too, Jessica," I said softly, "but I don't need anyone to love me out of financial obligation. I'd rather be alone than be loved, for what I can provide instead of who I am." I walked to the door, then turned back one last time. "When you're ready to have a relationship with me that's based on mutual respect instead of financial dependency, call me. Until then, I'll be learning how to live my own life." I left them sitting in their living room, the living room I'd been paying for, and drove home to my small apartment. For the first time in months, the silence there didn't feel oppressive. It felt like freedom. The next 60 days passed more quickly than I'd expected. I kept myself busy with practical matters, working with Patricia to restructure my financial arrangements, meeting with the bank to close joint accounts and remove Jessica's access to my assets, updating my will and insurance policies. Jessica called several times during those 60 days. I answered every call, but kept the conversations brief and businesslike. She alternated between begging me to reconsider and accusing me of being vindictive. I listened to both with equal calm. "This isn't who you are, Mom," she said during one particularly emotional call. "You're not a cruel person." "You're right," I replied. "I'm not cruel, but I'm also not a doormat anymore." On day 58, David called. "Margaret," he said, "we've talked to the bank. We can't qualify for a mortgage on our own with the amount still owed on the house." "I see," I said. "What are your plans?" "We're going to have to sell," he said quietly. "Downsize to something we can actually afford." "That sounds like a responsible decision," I said. "You could stop this," he said. "You could keep things the way they were." "Yes," I agreed. "I could. But David, why would I pay for a house where I'm not welcome?" He didn't have an answer for that. On day 60, exactly 2 months after my letter had been delivered, I executed the changes I'd been preparing. Jessica and David's names were removed from my accounts. The mortgage on their house was transferred entirely to my name, with them listed as renters who could be asked to leave with 30 days' notice. My will was updated to leave everything to the literacy center where I volunteered. That evening, I sat in my small apartment with a cup of tea and watched the sunset through my window. Tomorrow, Jessica and David would receive official notice that they had 30 days to either buy the house from me at fair market value or move out. I felt no satisfaction in their predicament, but I also felt no guilt. They had made their choices. Now they could live with the consequences. The final act came 3 weeks later. I was at the grocery store, the same one where I'd run into Jessica months earlier when I saw them again. Both of them this time, looking stressed and tired as they shopped with obvious attention to prices and coupons. Jessica saw me first. Our eyes met across the produce section, and for a moment neither of us moved. Then she walked over to me. "Mom," she said quietly. "Hello, Jessica," I replied. "We're moving out next week," she said. "We found a rental across town. It's smaller, but we can afford it on our own." "That's good," I said. "Independence is important." She stood there for a moment, seeming to struggle with something. Finally, she spoke again. "I'm sorry," she said, "for all of it. for taking your help for granted, for treating you badly, for everything. I studied her face, looking for sincerity, for understanding. What I saw was a woman who had finally been forced to confront the reality of her situation. "Thank you for saying that," I said. "It means something." "Does it mean enough?" she asked hopefully. Could we try again? Maybe have coffee sometime?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. Part of me, the part that had spent 40 years putting Jessica first, wanted to say yes immediately, wanted to forgive and forget and go back to the way things were. But the way things were had nearly destroyed me. "Maybe," I said finally, "when you're settled in your new place, when you've had time to learn how to stand on your own, maybe we can talk." "How long?" she asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But Jessica, when we do talk, it needs to be between equals. Not between someone who gives and someone who takes. Between two adults who choose to be in each other's lives because they want to be, not because they have to be." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I understand." "I hope you do," I said gently. "Because I love you, sweetheart. I always have. But I won't be anyone's financial safety net again, and I won't be treated like a burden by people I'm supporting." "I know," she whispered. "I know." I reached out and touched her arm briefly. "Take care of yourself, Jessica. Learn how to be happy without my money. And when you can do that, call me." I walked away then, leaving her standing there among the vegetables. I didn't look back, but I could feel her watching me go. 6 months later, I sold Jessica and David's house and used the proceeds to buy a small cottage near the coast. It has a garden where I grow tomatoes and herbs, a porch where I read in the evenings, and a spare bedroom for visitors, if any ever come. I still volunteer at the literacy center, but now I also take pottery classes and have joined a book club with women my own age. I'm learning what it means to live for myself instead of through someone else. Jessica has called twice since I moved. Both times, she talked about her life, her job, her struggles with managing finances on her own. She didn't ask for money or help. She didn't complain about her reduced circumstances. She just talked. Like a daughter might talk to her mother. Like an equal might talk to an equal. We're not there yet. May never be there again. Too much damage has been done. Too many years of unhealthy patterns to overcome. But for the first time in my adult life, I'm not sitting by the phone hoping for someone else's attention to validate my existence. I'm living my own life. Finally, completely, unapologetically, my own life. And you know what I've discovered? I'm enough. All by myself. Without anyone to take care of or anyone to take care of me, I'm enough. It only took me 68 years to learn that lesson. But better late than never, I suppose. The waves are calling outside my window, and I have a sunset to watch. Some pleasures, I've learned, are best enjoyed alone.